Hey everybody, thanks for joining me today. This video is about how do you speak to your children about racism. I believe this may be the hottest topic in the minds of most parents today. Hello, my name is Jim Johnson. I'm one of the senior pastors at Preston Trail Community Church in Frisco, Texas. It seems like almost every week there is some seizure of racial unrest or example of racism taking place in our country. It blows up our news feeds. It takes up a lot of time on cable news. And quite frankly, I do believe it is the single most important issue that we are dealing with today in our culture. And if your kids have not already, very soon, they're going to be asking you about racism. Why, Mom and Dad, can't people of different colors get along? Why, Mom and Dad, do people treat me differently because my skin is a different shade from my friends? These questions are questions that our kids have, and perhaps we have them too. Well, today what I want to do is address this topic in two main ways. I want to first of all talk about why it is that we still struggle with racism in our country. And second, I want to address how we can break the cycle of racism in our culture. So first, why do we continue to struggle with this issue? Well, there are many factors that can be weighed into this whole equation, and this is a short video. Let me just address some of the ones that have been most pertinent to me. I believe that we all have assumptions about the nature of life, about relationships, and whatever assumptions we have about life, we tend to see life through the lens of those assumptions, and we make decisions based on those assumptions. And when it comes to racism, I think, quite frankly, that we assume way too much. Here's some things that we assume. The first thing is this. We assume way too much about people when we see their external appearance. When you first saw me on this video, perhaps you went, oh, he's got gray hair, some crow's feet. He's an older guy. And so you're probably thinking, irrelevant. What can this guy know? He's out of touch. But I would say if you got to know me, you would know that my hair is not gray. It's literally platinum blonde. And I do stay in touch, and I have grandkids who actually think I'm really hip and cool. In fact, I know who Kanye and Kim's kids are. North and Saint and Chicago and Psalm. So I'm not totally irrelevant. But here's what happens. When we see someone who is different from us, our mind immediately, without even thinking about it intentionally, begins to calculate, is this person safe? Is this person not? Is this person out to get me or to help me? And based on our assumptions about people who do not look like we look, then many times we will have incorrect assumptions about the nature of that person that we are now seeing. You see, when fear strikes, or when we're under stress, or when we're angry, our minds take us back automatically to our default categories. And our default category is, hey, I'm assuming that people who look like me are going to be for me and with me, and people who don't look like me, they may not be, so I have to watch out. Here's a second assumption. Many times we assume that everybody else's life is just like ours. And if you are white, living in this white dominant culture, it's easy to think that, well, everybody experiences life the way we do. But that is not the way it really is. You see, we live in a culture that was shaped by Anglo-Europeans for Anglo-Europeans. And we have this thought that, hey, if we just work hard enough and have enough pluck, and we'll raise ourselves up by our own bootstraps, so we're going to be successful in the world. And then when we see people of different color who don't exactly come up to our standards of what we think they should do or accomplish or whatever, then many times we look down on them or we think less of them because they haven't gotten to where we are in our life journey. And what we don't realize is that their pathway to where they are in life is a different pathway than ours. You know, I had a friend who is a pastor of a black church here in the North Texas area put it like this. He says, if you are of color, it's like being left-handed in a right-handed world. Well, guess what? I'm left-handed, and I knew exactly what he's talking about. Do you know that if you're left-handed, scissors don't work the right way? That when you go to class in elementary school, most of the time you're sitting at right-handed desks. When it comes to dipping ice cream, most ice cream dippers are right-handed, not left-handed. It's harder to dip the ice cream. Zippers are right-handed, not left-handed. If you want to play the guitar, you have to restring it or learn the chords backwards. Now, this is a small inconvenience for left-handers, but we still have to exert additional thought and additional effort just to keep up with right-handers. Well, you multiply that 10 times or 100 times, and you begin to see that people of color, they are living in a white dominant world, and things slant against them in a way that they do not slant against those of us who are white. Now, there's one other assumption that we have, and here it is. We assume, many of us, especially if you are religious or you follow Jesus, you think, well, hey, I'm not racist. I've opened my mind. I comprehend my biases. I really want to love people across every racial spectrum. And you go, so if I'm not racist, we assume that our job is done. We assume that we don't have to do anything else. And that's really been my plight in my life. I have a wonderful sister, and she's adopted 4 kids, and 2 are biracial. 1 is African American. And I thought, hey, I love these kids. They're a part of my family. I'm not racist. And yet I failed to really understand the nature of Micah 6:8 when the prophet writes, what is it that God requires of us? But to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God. Now, when I dove into the meaning of act justly, here's what I discovered recently, that acting justly doesn't simply mean we're not to do wrong things. It means that we are actually supposed to work at making wrong things right. We're supposed to lead. We're supposed to defend. We're supposed to assert. We're supposed to sometimes even fight for the loss of rights of certain people in appropriate ways. Acting justly is as much about making wrong things right as it is about not doing wrong things. And so until we begin to change our assumptions as parents, we may not be able to lead our kids in the direction that we want to. You can't judge a book by its cover, we say. Just because someone looks different, it does not mean that they are different in the most human kinds of ways. It means that we have to recognize that people have a different pathway to success in life than we do. And it means if we follow God that we really are to be champions and to assert and to vie for the end of racism and injustice in the kinds of ways that God approves. Now, those are some assumptions that need to be changed. What about how we specifically speak to our kids and what do we teach them? Well, I want to break that down in 2 simple things. First of all, I want to talk about Jesus' big truth about racism. And here it is. When you look at the Great Commandment, you can find it in Luke chapter 10, verses 25 all the way through 37, when he shares the story of the Good Samaritan, that the greatest commandment is to love God with all of our heart, all of our soul, all of our mind, and all of our strength. And he says the second commandment is equal unto it, and that is we're to love our neighbor as ourselves. So if you're beginning with kids at a younger age, here's the big picture you want to share with them. What God also asks of us, especially from the New Testament perspective, is to love God, to love our neighbors, and everyone is our neighbor. No matter their race, no matter their gender, no matter their ethnic background, no matter their orientation, every person that God created has his image in them, and we are to love our neighbors. Now, once your kids begin to understand this big picture, it's important that they begin to apply it. And I want to offer just 3 ways that they can begin to apply it. Here's the first one. That you want to lead your children to love people the way Jesus loved people. You know, there are different nuances of the word love in Greek. In fact, there are different words for those nuances. But in English, we kind of do a mashup and put them all in one word. Like I will say, I love Mexican food. I love my mom. I love the Dallas Cowboys. But all three of those kind of refer to a different kind of love. When Jesus spoke about loving others, he used the kind of love that is unconditional. And what it means simply is this. It means that you are to wish and to will and to work for the well-being of another person, no matter what. And so that's why Jesus got quite a reputation for loving people who were notorious sinners. He crossed the lines of ethnic boundaries that were set very clearly in his day. He spent time conversing with a Samaritan woman, a half-breed in the mind of the Jewish people, and it was not typical for a man to address another woman in public who was not his spouse. Jesus crossed lines in his own culture in order to build relationships, and in doing so, he wished, he willed, and he worked for the well-being of people across the board, across his own spectrum in his day. And so I believe what God is calling us to do is to help our kids know that loving someone is not always liking them. It means that we're simply working for their best, regardless. Whatever helps them along, whatever helps them become a better person, whatever helps them learn a lesson that God wants to learn, we are there to come alongside them and help. That's unconditional love. It's the way Jesus loved people. Here's the second application. We are not only to love people the way Jesus loved people, but we are to actually love the people Jesus loved. I already spoke briefly about that Jesus had this knack for loving people who were different from him, who were across a cultural boundary. And I believe that is at the heart of where we are in our world today. That is, we want to love the people that Jesus loved, the people who are religious, perhaps like you are, or the people who have no religion, people who think like you politically or who disagree with you politically, people who come from a different part of the country or another country, people of color, people of different ethnic cultures and backgrounds. We, like Jesus, are to love people from every walk of life. Now, once again, that simply means that we are to, on every occasion, when it is in our purview to do so, we are to love them, to work for their well-being and their good. So we not only want to love people like Jesus, we want to love the people that Jesus loved. And then finally, we want to encourage our kids to reach out and begin to truly connect with people who are different from them. Jesus intentionally did that. He intentionally spent time with prostitutes, with tax collectors, other notorious sinners. He sought out lepers. He was intentionally building these relationships. As a matter of fact, he had quite a reputation of eating with and having fellowship with people that the normal or the kind of the average person of the day would really frown upon. And so here's what I want to encourage you to do. When it comes to birthday parties, when it comes to sleepovers, when it comes to going on field trips, whatever the case might be, I want to encourage you to have your kids invite people who look different than them. Encourage them along the way to befriend someone who maybe not be in the popular group. That they might be on kind of the out group. Not all the kids are free of disabilities. Some kids in their class may have disabilities. Whatever the case is, encourage your children to really make connection and include them in your lives together. And quite frankly, one of the best ways that you can teach your children to do that is to do that yourself. And I want to encourage you to begin crossing some of those barriers, inviting people over. There's a wonderful practice going on in many churches here in North Texas. It's called the Unity Table. And every time there's a fifth Sunday during the year, we're encouraging our people to invite someone who doesn't look like them over for dinner. And I can't think of a better way for you to reinforce that particular value than doing something like the Unity Table, inviting people who look different from you over for dinner to begin a friendship and a relationship. You know, there's a Harvard sociologist, Orlando Patterson, who said in the past century, in the 1950s through the early 2000s, those were the most significant moments in history in terms of racial reconciliation and racial change. He said, we came light years. And while we can be thankful for that, I do believe we still have a long way to go. And I believe that your children and mine can be the generation that will truly reconcile races together and end injustice and become and create an environment where all races can be together, love one another, and prosper. That's my hope for you. It's my hope for you as a parent. God bless you. If you appreciated this particular YouTube and you're interested in more like it, I encourage you to simply hit the subscribe button. And then also, my co-senior pastor, Paul Baser, and I have written a book entitled Tough Stuff Parenting. And we talk about a number of these kinds of topics. If you're interested in more talks like these, you can again subscribe or check out our book on Amazon.com, Tough Stuff Parenting. God bless you. Thanks for joining me today.